speeches, we have the objectives of each speech. The first speech will be by Lindsay, and the objectives will be by her evaluator, John Fantasia. John, would you give Lindsay's objectives?
Lindsay is repeating her second speech. She's going to be factoring the feedback from the last time that I evaluated her. Her objective is to slow down, try to phrase things more naturally and understandably, make more warm, genuine eye contact with the audience, have more variation of her pitch tone, be less monotone, to deliver a more interesting, less personal, and more scholarly speech about the subject than the last time. Lindsay.
Come listen, Noah, and I'll sing you a song of three merry gentlemen riding along. They met a fair maid and to her did say, "We're afraid this cold morning will do you some harm." Now that is the first verse of the song, The Crafty Maid's Policy. It's an old British song, and it's an example of a ballad. Now, when I say the term ballad, I don't mean a slow, corny love song, from the last 20 or 30 years. Rather, in the context of folk music, when I say ballad, I mean a song that tells a story, a narrative story song. Typically, these songs come in 4-line rhyming stanzas. They can be about anything. They don't have to be about love at all. And they can be fast, they can be slow, they can have choruses or refrain lines, or they can have none at all. And really the most important thing is that they go from point A to point B with a conflict resolution. This type of story, or narrative story song, was common throughout Europe, but the ones that have really lived on with us today are the ones that were from Great Britain and Ireland, that came over with the immigrants and became part of the fabric of American culture as well. Given the age and the subject matter and the archaic language, these songs might come across as being a little bit outdated and irrelevant to the modern listener. However, I don't think I'm alone in finding that these songs are still very fresh and relevant. Anyone who grew up in the 50s and 60s probably knows a lot of ballads just by default because of Simon and Garfunkel and the Everly Brothers and Joan Baez. But even today, indie bands like the Decemberists are refreshing these old songs and putting them alongside their new songs. So clearly these songs do still have life and power, and here's why I think that is. Humans are a storytelling species. You might imagine these songs being sung alongside long stories around the campfire or the indoor fire by people who didn't have TV or radio or very many books to read. And indeed, these songs were perfect for passing on stories in a time when people weren't all literate. The format of the songs and the rhyming structure helped people to remember and pass them on. But yet, even despite all of our modern entertainment, these songs have still stayed very popular and still very, very relevant to at least some nerdy people like me. And I think that's because of what the folklorist and collector Alan Lomax had to say. He said the first function of music, especially of folk music, is to produce a feeling of security for the listener by voicing the particular quality of a land and the life of its people. Now, embedded in these stories, these songs were also helping to instill moral codes, especially around things like sex and courting. On the opposite end, there were countless songs that were humorous in body, that you could see the repressed sexuality of people coming out and lashing against that oppressive morality that you might see in other songs. Some songs, like the one that I opened with, illustrate the restrictive gender roles, but do so in a funny way that sees the woman outsmarting the man by using her wit and her pluck. Countless other songs tell the story of countries. They tell the story of occupations and industries that in some cases have long since died out. In all of these songs, there is an element of history and a record of the way of life, or of the way that life was in the past for the average person. It's a more intimate look than the looks that we get through history books, and it puts us in touch with the way people were, the values they had, and who you and I might have been 200, 300, 400 years ago. So even though these songs have their old-fashioned language and their outmoded values and some scenarios that could not and thankfully do not happen to us nowadays. I mean, for example, we don't all go around calling each other Lord and Lady anymore. There aren't any knights. Women don't have to pay attention to the songs that have warnings like, "Come all ye fair maids, take a warning by me." And luckily not many men are off fighting in the wars against Napoleon's armies or going across the sea and not coming back for 7 years and being unrecognizable to their true love. But even though these things aren't really happening to us, the emotions that they express are still very relevant and still very relatable. Anyone who has lost a love knows something about the sadness and the bitterness and the anguish that is expressed in a song about a lover who's lost at sea. Anyone who wants to revel in the pride of their country, especially if that country is Ireland, has countless songs where they can celebrate that. As a woman, especially in the time of the hashtag #MeToo movement, I really love singing songs like that song I opened with, where the woman outsmarts a lascivious guy. I find what I think countless other singers of these songs have found, that these public domain songs give us all something to sing. We can each adopt these traditional songs for our own and express them ourselves through the songs. Finally, while these songs connect us to our history and help us express ourselves, they also have the power to help us connect to other people here and now. These shared songs are a shared language. Often at performances, I'll be bombarded by audience members afterwards who are so excited to talk about how they learned a song that I sang, or how they heard it at a hootenanny 20 years before I was even born. And you go to singing sessions, and that's what everybody's there to do. You're all there to sing your favorite songs, and then to trade stories afterwards. And those stories are always a beautiful mix of history and data about the songs themselves, as well as personal anecdotes and the love that each person has for the songs. You sing a song and the community repays you with a mix of facts and history about those songs. These songs are cultural community currency. And that's why I think these age-old, twisty, weird, archaic songs, these story ballads, are still so relevant even for us today. They put us in touch with our past, our histories, and the people and places that we came from. They give each singer an opportunity to express themselves, and they help us continue to connect with each other every day. Thank you.